What if a fight isn't just about sport, but politics too? The strongest fighter doesn't always win. Sometimes it's the one on the right side, Lomachenko, one of the most technical boxers in the world. But his silence on politics led to a boycott. The judge's decision in his fight with Haney is one of the most controversial in recent years. Usyk, a national hero in Ukraine. But is his loyal public image a choice or a necessity? Boxing is no longer just a sport, it's becoming a stage for global politics. The real decisions happen far from the ring, and victories aren't always about skill. Full story in the full episode. Subscribe to see what others try to hide. Boxing has always been more than just a sport. It's a stage not only for physical battles, but also for ideological, political, and economic conflicts. Behind the big fights and the shine of championship belts are strings of influence that stretch far beyond the ring, reaching governments, corporations, and ideologies. In recent years, there's been growing talk about biased judging, where fighters don't lose to their opponents, but to the system, simply because they ended up on the wrong side of politics. Unfair decisions in boxing aren't new. In the past, they were often blamed on corruption or business interests. But nowadays, words like censorship, political pressure, and ideological loyalty are being used more and more. Take fighters from countries with tense relations with the West. Their matches often raise eyebrows because of how judges' decisions. Some face clear bias even when they dominate the fight. A win by a politically inconvenient boxer might shift the spotlight away from the sport itself and toward the flag he represents or ideas he promotes. That turns what should be a fair competition into a tool of international pressure. A case in point, Vasily Lomachenko. Vasily Lomachenko is one of the most technically skilled boxers in the history of the sport. An Olympic champion and former world champion in 3 weight divisions, his name was once synonymous with ring IQ and surgical precision. But in recent years, Lomachenko has found himself facing not just opponents in the ring, but an invisible, far tougher rival, political pressure that started to affect his career. The shift in promoters' attitude toward Lomachenko began when he started openly expressing his Christian faith, often displaying religious symbols during post-fight interviews. He also consistently avoided provocative questions designed to inflame tensions between Russians and Ukrainians. Instead of playing into the media narrative, he chose to stay away from politics altogether. Lomachenko viewed the conflict in eastern Ukraine as a kind of civil war between blood brothers, a perspective that ran counter to the expectations of both the media and political figures who sought clear-cut statements and public loyalty. By refusing to take sides or echo divisive rhetoric, he distanced himself from the mainstream narrative, which didn't sit well with those looking to weaponize athletes for ideological purposes. In 2020, he and Alexander Usyk appeared in a documentary produced by the Ukrainian Orthodox Church under the Moscow Patriarchate, which sparked outrage in Ukraine's pro-Western media. On top of that, his neutral and non-aggressive stance on the conflict in eastern Ukraine was seen by some as betrayal, and in the West, as a reason to keep him at arm's length. He found himself in a strange position, a fighter whose silence spoke louder than words. Despite his obvious talent, Lomachenko stopped receiving the same level of promotion and support from American promoters. His 2023 fight against Devin Haney became perhaps the clearest example of political pressure influencing his career. Lomachenko dominated the later rounds, landed more clean shots, and had Haney backing up. But the judges gave the win to the American, sparking outrage even within the states. Many called it the most blatantly stolen fight in recent memory. But there was no review, no sanctions, no serious discussion. Lomachenko winning would have been too inconvenient. Haney, the reigning champion, publicly echoing the right narratives, was the safer bet for the titles in the industry. Lomachenko doesn't support the war. He doesn't campaign for any political side. He simply stays quiet. But that very silence, his attempt to remain outside the ideological conflict, became the main reason for criticism and pressure. His faith, traditional values, and distance from official rhetoric turned him into a target for those who expect athletes to show open loyalty to Western messaging. Promoters, media, and even some fans now want fighters to act like flagpoles, holding the flag, the slogan, and the right tweet. Lomachenko, on the other hand, remained an old-school fighter. He spoke with his fists, not with political speeches. On June 5, 2025, Vasily Lomachenko announced his retirement from professional boxing at the age of 37. Despite his age, he remained an elite competitor and could have easily continued for a couple of more years at the highest level. He fell short of unifying all the belts in 2 weight divisions, not due to lack of skill, but because he chose to stay true to his values. In a sport increasingly shaped by corruption and political bias, Lomachenko stood as an ideological outsider, unwilling to compromise his principles for titles or public favor. A contrasting example is Alexander Usyk, Lomachenko's fellow countryman and close friend. Usyk conformed to the political pressure coming from Ukraine, largely because in the context of war and tight control over public messaging, there was practically no alternative for someone with global ambitions. Since Russia openly got involved in the ongoing conflict in 2022, no Ukrainian athlete, apart from Lomachenko, has been able to remain neutral or openly express views that go against the prevailing narrative. Usyk publicly stated that Crimea is Ukraine, even though before 2022 his answers to the "whose Crimea" question were more ambiguous. He joined the Territorial Defense Forces. On paper, though, he started giving more interviews in Ukrainian despite the fact that his native language is Russian, and prior to 2022 he gave interviews exclusively in Russian. Mentions of his close friendship with Vasily Lomachenko disappeared from his public statements, even though they had been very close before the war. Many people now question how someone like Usyk, who once openly supported the canonical Orthodox Church, could accept an award from President Zelensky, who has led a crackdown on that very church. At this point, it seems less like a personal choice and more like a strategic move to survive in a harsh political environment. To keep his career alive, Usyk has had to play a role, one he may not even fully agree with personally. He's no longer just a boxer. He's now a representative of a politically controlled system, where stepping off script could cost him his reputation and his career. The Usyk versus Dubois fight. What really happened? Usyk's August 2023 fight against Daniel Dubois raised a lot of questions, and it's entirely possible that politics played a role in the outcome. In round 5, Dubois landed a body shot that dropped Usyk. Referee Luis Pabon paused the fight and gave Usyk time to recover, ruling the punch a low blow. Usyk stayed down for nearly 4 minutes before continuing, and ultimately knocked out Dubois in the 9th round. However, replays showed that Dubois' punch landed right on the belt line, and many experts believe it could have been considered legal. Objectively speaking, it was a borderline shot, but here's what raised eyebrows. The referee didn't even bother to check the replay. The WBA later rejected Dubois' team's formal protest. The result stood with no sanctions or official review. That leads to a fair question. If it had been anyone else in Usyk's place, would the outcome have been the same? Why might politics have been involved? Usyk is Ukraine's flagship figure in global boxing. With the country at war, he's practically the only Ukrainian boxer still competing at the highest level, aside from Lomachenko. A loss on the international stage would have been seen as symbolically damaging, almost like a hit to Ukraine's image. The fight took place in Poland, a major ally of Ukraine at the time. Usyk was a fan favorite, especially among local audiences and Ukrainian refugees. It's not hard to imagine the judging being emotionally biased in his favor. At the time, a potential Usyk-Fury fight was already being discussed. A loss to Dubois would have jeopardized millions in contract deals. The promoters weren't focused on fairness. They were focused on business. Politics doesn't throw punches, but it still lands them. Technically, the fight wasn't rigged, but the political and financial context surrounding the event could have influenced the referee's judgment and the organization's decisions. The body shot from Dubois was borderline, yet in a truly neutral fight it might have been called a knockdown. No, politics didn't hit Usyk in the stomach, but it may have ensured that shot didn't cost him the victory. As we've seen in the cases of both Oleksandr Usyk and Vasily Lomachenko, politics can play just as big a role in boxing as athletic performance. Behind-the-scenes decisions often shape fight outcomes, title distributions, and even the direction of a fighter's career. We'll keep following these developments and continue bringing you the most important insights. In the next episode, we'll uncover the shady tactics behind fixed matches in the world of sports. Subscribe to our Telegram channel to stay updated on fresh news, investigations, and exclusive content.